Good afternoon everyone and welcome to an iChemE Safety Centre facilitated webinar by Salus Technical's David Jamieson on Can you learn from the poor HSE inspection scores of others in major hazard industries? David Jamieson is a process safety engineer and founded Salus Technical in 2015. They help customers understand and manage the risks of major accidents via 3 business units: engineering, training and software. Prior to launching Salus, David worked as the Process Safety Technical Authority for a UK offshore oil and gas operator and held several safety engineering roles prior to that. Today's webinar is real data received following a Freedom of Information request to the HSE for 147 letters issued in 2019 to duty holders in the North Sea. These were regarding non-compliances on their offshore assets, to which Salus Technical has published a guidance document. The webinar will outline the key safety statistics from the HSE and provide insight from the analysed letters, showing 3 points. 1. Common issues from duty holders in the North Sea. 2. Potential weak signals in the sector. And 3. Provide a path forward for safe operations. Okay, David, if you want to carry on.
Hi folks, thanks very much for that introduction, Craig. So yes, as he says, we're going to have a look at what we can learn from the poor inspection scores of others. And this whole piece of work began when I saw this statistic that's up on the screen here. The HSE every single year publish the offshore safety statistics, and I had a look for 2019. And what came out is that 25% of offshore inspection findings scored either poor or very poor, which means that they fell substantially below the standard expected by the regulations. And within these, any of those that result in enforcement action, that's in the public domain. But anything that's the level below that, they are given as letter items to duty holders, but no one has access to those letters. So I thought, if we had access to those, could we learn and could we help to further prevent major accidents? And that is what today is all about. Can we learn from those poor scores of others? And as Craig said, a little bit about who we are. We help customers understand and manage the risks from major accidents, and we've got those 3 business units there: engineering, training and software. So if we look in, you've obviously most of you might have seen this before. Process safety is the absence of incident, is not the absence of incidents, it's the presence of effective barriers. And as we'll see throughout this presentation, that the letter items received indicate that there are instances of operators that might not have effective barriers in place, or they might not be able to demonstrate that they've got effective barriers in place. So just to give a little bit about the HSE Energy Division and what a offshore HSE inspection looks like. The Energy Division of the HSE, they're tasked with regulating the major hazard industries, of which the UK offshore oil and gas industry is one. And they, as part of that remit, they perform inspections, and they can both be planned, but they can also be unannounced as well. And that really, what that involves is several key topic specialists going offshore, and they will assess compliance with things like your offshore safety case across several different topics. And here's a flavour of the topics that we see here. So typically you'll get 3 to 4 of these assessed at any one time, and for the larger offshore installations, you might have several inspections that take place each year. Now, the HSE publish the statistics every single year, and if we have a little breakdown here, this is the overall scores of the 2019 inspections. The reason that we chose 2019, we felt it was the last year that was unimpacted by COVID, and the HSE only release letters as part of an FOI request if all the actions raised have been closed. So that's why we chose 2019. I'll go in a bit more detail into what the scores mean in a second, but one thing that stands out here is you might see that not all topics receive an equal amount of inspections, and that's just because historically the regulator knows that there's some topics that they like to focus on a lot more. So you'll see here that there's a lot more inspections done on maintenance management than there perhaps is on workforce engagement. A couple of other things to take out here. There's maybe the odd one, but there's not really particularly any outliers in terms of the ratio of scores. Most topics seem to have around about a quarter of scores that score either poor or very poor, as shown by the amber and the orange there. There are a few verification, loss of containment that maybe stand out a little bit, but broadly speaking, most scores look the same. But what do these scores mean? Well, this is an extract for some HSE guidance here. Every topic is scored, and that's given a score. And as we can see here, that ranges from exemplary right through to unacceptable. And really what we focused on was the poor and very poor. And in most instances, not all, but in most instances, those result in a letter being sent to duty holders. More on that in a few slides time. And I just wanted to take a little bit of a step back from 2019. We looked at the years preceding 2019 and indeed the years since, and that spread of sort of poor and very poor ranges from 25 to 30% every single year. So it seems that this is quite a static distribution of scores, and it's not like any one year stands out as the outlier. Now, anyone on the call who might have had a letter from the regulator, just to give you, there's all the data is covered here. It spells out things like, the duty holder's information, the date of the inspection, the name of the installation, the name of the inspectors that went across. And what it does is it summarises a bit about, who they are and what happened. But if we go on to the next slide, what they then do is for any issue that they found that's poor or very poor, the letter clearly lays out what regulation that they feel hasn't been met, and it gives a little bit of a summary of that part of the regulation. It then lists specifically exactly what the inspection revealed, and then it gives a list of actions that the duty holder must carry out. What's different between a letter and some enforcement action would be that the duty holder can then respond and provide the regulator with their plan for closing out all of these actions, rather than being told when to have them closed out by. And every letter, more or less, is the exact same format. I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the offshore statistics before I did a deeper dive into the results. So there's when you look at the HSE offshore statistics, they make for excellent reading. There are a lot of things that are trending in the right direction. Some perhaps in recent years might have leveled off, but overall it looks like a good picture. But what I'd like to say is that if you scratch beneath the surface, there are some weak signals that do start to reveal themselves. So as I've said, that's almost 1 in 4 offshore inspections score poor or very poor. So that means that they fall significantly below the standard expected from the regulations. On average in 2019, enforcement action was raised once a fortnight. And we have once every 5 days, we have an unplanned hydrocarbon release, and that can be classified as major, significant, or minor based upon their severity. And again, I want to have a little look into some of the weak signals. So in 2019 and indeed in 2020, the headline statistics make for excellent reading, and we should rightfully celebrate those. There were no fatalities and very few major releases. But again, looking beneath the surface, we have several hundred dangerous occurrences reportable under RIDDOR, and you can see that breakdown of hydrocarbon releases, topsides, pipelines, and the wells. And we obviously shouldn't forget, our non-hydrocarbon releases from smallbore tubing as well. So this isn't meant to scare anyone. This is just meant to show that if you really look at the statistics, there's things that we should celebrate, but equally there are weak signals that we might be creeping closer to another major accident. So what did we do at Salus Technical? Well, via a Freedom of Information request, we received an entire year's worth of HSE inspection letters. There were 18 different topics in total across all the letters. There was a total of 1,062 non-compliances. There's 147 letters sent to 56 duty holders. So there was a lot of data to go through. And unfortunately, this was pre-ChatGPT, so we had to do this all by hand. Just before I go into the results, and as we have throughout our document, is what we really want to avoid, and that's the reason why we've done a few webinars and published this document, is really don't want this just to be another piece of work that's done and sits on a shelf. So I'd really like to encourage anyone on the call, if you hear anything coming up in these next few slides that you think is within your sphere of influence, I would urge you, please take the action. Please go, please go back to your desk and try and make one change, implement one new measure that can prevent this from happening to you. So I'm just going to go through a few topics. I've got SECI management, I've got operational risk assessment, I've got process isolation, and I've got human factors. And what I'm going to do is, how these next few slides go is I just have what the success criteria is from the HSE offshore inspection guidance, and then a summary of the findings. Any finding that I give here is not in isolation. It means that at least half a dozen duty holders have received a comment like does this. So this is always completely anonymized. It's not to try and name and shame anyone. It's just to show as an industry what the state is. So our assumption was that if around half a dozen duty holders are struggling with the same issue, in all likelihood there's other people that might be too. So it's an opportunity for them to learn and then make improvements now, rather than wait a few years until they're maybe inspected on that topic. So again, this is just an extract from the inspection guide. So by SECI, we obviously mean safety and environmental critical elements. That's like such parts of your installation that if they failed, they could cause or contribute to a major accident. And of course, there's lots of regulations offshore. One obviously being the offshore safety case regulations, or PFIR, that require SECIs to be identified and to be maintained and in good working order. And a little bit of a subcategory, this actually is its own inspection topic, but I thought I would combine these as operational risk assessment. And what that means is that if you've got a safety and environmental critical element, a SECI, and its performance is impaired such that it's not meeting the performance standard that you set out, then duty holders must have a way of assessing what that SECI impairment means for their overall risk. And traditionally, but not every duty holder calls it this, but traditionally it's called operational risk assessment. So let's go through these two topics and have a look. So first of all, it looks at operational risk assessment. So all aspects of the SECI's condition should be reviewed. And what we found in the inspections, there was lots of instances where the regulator found impaired SECIs, where ORAs weren't being conducted at all, or those that had been done weren't really given enough information. It seemed there was a lot of ORAs for that risk assessment was more focused on the task of reinstating the equipment rather than the risk posed by the equipment being impaired. The writing of performance standards is a whole other topic, but a performance standard for each SECI should have lots of things like what's the function, what's it required to do, when should it be available, how reliable should it be, what events it should survive, and how it interacts with other SECIs. And it was clear that there was a lot of performance standards reviewed where it was falling short of that, and the objectives of the SECI, for example, weren't clearly defined. Neither was the functionality. And that's very important because, as we might see in a few other slides, that when you maintain, when you test safety critical equipment, it should be clear to the person doing that assurance activity that what failure looks like and what would be the criteria for them to then go and do something like raise an ORA. And again, it's clear that's not always in the right place. And again, a lack of assessments on the availability and reliability of SECIs, and that came from, again, that not being documented in the performance standards. So a key takeaway from this slide is the triggers for operational risk assessment seem like they could be better defined in places, and that all starts with more clearly written performance standards. It's fine. And then just on that, yeah, unclear pass or fail criteria on assurance activities. It should be very clear to someone assuring the performance of safety critical equipment when that performance isn't being met. And of course, the good practice is to have that failure criteria spelled out both in the performance standard, but also in the work order of the assurance activity. And again, the consequence of not having that is you might then not escalate that failure. You might not raise the ORA, and the people that need to know that info might not get that information. There's obviously a lot of work being talked about in recent years about maintenance deferrals. This was obviously before the COVID pandemic, and we know that that's had a negative impact on maintenance backlog. But again, there was lots of examples of safety critical equipment that had overdue work, and there was an inadequate or there was a lack of a risk assessment as to why it was okay for that not to have been done. Finally, it seemed like there was some examples where the maintenance management system and the performance standards, again, weren't aligned, and good practices that should all be contained in one document that's very, that you can clearly link the work orders and the maintenance management system, to functional criteria and the performance standard. And I think I might have one more slide on this topic. Yep, I said there too that there was. Yeah, not following a company's ORA procedure. There's, OE UK have a really good guidance document on operational risk assessment. It's actually being updated, and again, there was over half a dozen examples of duty holders where they weren't following that good practice with ORAs. And finally, one thing that comes back to competence, and this is laced right through the work, is that the personnel that were required to take part in the ORA process, whether that be raising ORAs, taking part in the assessment, reviewing them, approving them, managing them, that there was a lot of examples where there was no formal training given to those people. So that's the overall thing on ORAs. That seemed like it was very common findings across quite a lot of duty holders. And from my own personal experience, these are issues that I've had experience with too. So the next. Sorry, that actually is one more, pardon me. But yeah, actually, this is a key point about the validity period. So if you have a safety and environmental critical element that's impaired, part of that risk assessment should be how long you are comfortable to continue to operate with that impairment. And there was lots of examples where the validity period, it was just set on when the repair was planned to take place. So it was being driven by when you could get the parts or mobilize the equipment or personnel, rather than how comfortable are you with the risk. And the final one is that, yeah, I mean, when you have an impaired safety critical element, you're almost certainly moving down the hierarchy of controls, and you replace operational tasks. Sorry, you replace equipment with tasks that people might perform, and that might be adequate for a temporary period of time. But it seems that the longer an ORA is in place, that the more likely these are to fall by the wayside and not be done. And there's lots of examples, and unfortunately I've had this happen with me also, is where the regulator's gone, well, this ORA says that you're going to get these people to perform this, and that hasn't been happening. So, not doing the things that we said that we would do in an ORA. And again, before we go on to the next topic, it's just a reminder for everyone. This document is on our website. It's free of charge. Just go to our homepage and you can download a copy. And again, I would urge you to read about the topics that's relevant to your work, and then please, take the appropriate action. So then on to loss of containment, and obviously that's again, you've got your safety critical equipment that really just keeps it in the pipe. That's what we're looking at. There's lots of things that can cause a hydrocarbon release, and there's the failure of equipment, but there's obviously poor operational practices as well. So I've got a few slides on loss of containment. So one of them relates to management of change. As many of you might know, that lots of major accidents, a contributing factor was inadequate management of change, and that's often not a large change. It's it's the cumulative impact of lots of small creeping changes that have fed in. And again, there was lots of examples where it was clear that there was a change that had been made that hadn't been adequately assessed. So I'd say that management of change training, is a crucial part, of business in a duty holder, and everyone should understand that no changes should be made outside of that management of change process. Inadequate management of change is like one thing, but not doing it at all is something quite different. And onto alarms, you might have seen in the past week that there was a duty holder given enforcement action for a large number of standing alarms. The MUA guidance, has a very low number of standing alarms that should be in place, and the rates of alarms were far in excess of those recommendations in that relevant industry guidance. So there was lots of examples of a high number of standing alarms. And again, as you know, there's been several major accidents where there was alarms going off that were ignored because those in the control room had lots of other alarms to deal with at the same time. Again, shift handover, that's something that's been well talked about, in lots of other ICME webinars as well. And again, there was lots of examples of where those were either not being performed or they were being performed ineffectively. There's lots of guidance from the regulator about the expectations for handover. Again, looking back at other risk assessments, it's clear that there should be a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, and the PFIR regulations require all of your fire and explosion risks to be adequately risk assessed. And HAZOP is one of the main, it's one of the tools in our toolbox for those type of risk assessment. And again, it was found after some instance that the safety studies such as HAZOP didn't include all of the reasonably foreseeable hazardous conditions or the control measures. So just because we've got these risk assessments in place, that's one thing that we should be making sure that that they're good quality, that they're kept up to date, and that they're regularly reviewed. And as well on senior leadership, again, these are just sort of extra findings in relation to some loss of containment ones about the personnel with leadership responsibilities in the organisation, hadn't received that adequate process safety leadership training. And that brings us perfectly on to human factors training, which is our final topic that I wanted to go through. One thing to note is that there is now a dedicated human factors offshore inspection guide that's available on the HSE's website. That wasn't in place. Here, but and there's some things written up there about the significance of human factors. But as you'll see here, the sort of one of the main findings, which I think is on my next slide, but it seems to me that human factors, certainly as of 2019, although we have seen subsequent letters from future years, it still sits as something else. It's not integrated into major accident hazard or process safety management. Let's just go into a few things here. So safety critical task analysis, it's a cornerstone of process safety, a very important thing. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's quite a resource intensive activity, but again, highly important. And it seemed that although there was lots of examples of these being done, much like with MLC or with ORA, where they've got companies have their own procedures, it seemed there was a lot of companies that didn't have their own governance for safety critical task analysis. So it was being done by consultants, but it wasn't being done to a defined standard for that duty holder. One of the most difficult parts, or certainly the first part you have to do of safety critical task analysis, is develop that full list of tasks. And there was several duty holders that didn't have that list. So although there was examples that the task analysis had been done, there wasn't a defined list of everywhere where it should have been done. And yeah, it was maybe, this is maybe slightly beyond my competence, but again, there was some of these studies where I think that the quality, was maybe brought into question and didn't cover everything that it should, and that then stems back to that root cause where it was, there's that lack of a corporate governance on how to perform these things. And yeah, there was a similar one there about that performance influencing factors, again, not being identified. And again, a lack of training and competence. It seems that personnel that had responsibilities relating to human factors, hadn't received that adequate training. So just to sort of summarise human factors is, although it's clear there's lots of examples of it being done very well, and I know that there's a lot of work being done since 2019, and there's that new inspection guide from the HSE, which is an excellent document. But it still, certainly at this time, seemed like it was something that was a bit decoupled from that overall risk management, and that kind of shows from from there not being clear governance there. And it's a phrase that I think that the regulator uses, that although that you should be an informed customer, there should be someone in your organisation that's appointed to be the lead of human factors, and it's not something that's just done by consultants. But it's very easy, and I've done this in the past, and you've read findings or you've read incident reports, and then you think, oh yeah, but that couldn't happen here. I would really urge everyone to go through our document and really ask yourself, are you confident that these findings wouldn't apply to your operation? And I think going back and looking at my time in a duty holder, there was lots of these where I think at the wrong time, had we been inspected on, that we might have also been pulled up. Major accidents are rare, so some trends and statistics that lend themselves very well for personal safety, for occupational safety, maybe not so for process safety. So are you happy that you've got the right key performance indicators or KPIs? And if you do, are they visible? Are they understood by everyone? And are they being monitored? And then are you acting upon those results? And again, I really like the simple one is, is your workforce, on each of your assets, are they aware, of that asset's major accident hazards? And would you say, and again, looking at the things here, there's lots of findings that relate to, deviating from procedures or not following them properly, or not doing things, so are we happy that the frontline operators, have we provided them with enough time, with enough resources, competence? Are our procedures, as good as they can be? And have we engaged that, our workforce in process safety? And one sort of key trend from this work as well is that there's certainly evidence of cases of an inadequate audit and assurance. That plan to check act cycle, and if that's working in your organisation, it should be striving towards continuous improvement. So all your numbers should over time be trending in the right direction, and a key part of that is a robust audit and assurance of your processes, of your working practices. And are you happy that you're set up, that you can find these things before the regulator does? So that's something else to consider. Now our document is over 50 pages long, and there's lots of people that I wouldn't expect to read that cover to cover. So what we've done is, on one of the pages near the very end, is we've got just actions for leaders. So although it's all about we've written it by inspection topic, we just felt that was a sensible way to write it. You can also we could have done that anyway. We could have used the ICME process safety framework or process safety fundamentals. So these are some of the key takeaways here. Is that nobody deliberately acts unsafe, but we got that general sense that there might be a lack of process safety competency throughout, or even just a general training and competence. So can you demonstrate, as is your legal duty, that all of your staff are adequately trained and competent and given the right resources to do their task? Risk assessment, the second one, incredibly complex topic, lots of different type of risk assessment, incredibly an incredible drain on resources at time. But again, is your risk assessment robust? Is it being done at the right time with the right people there? And it's not just looking at risk assessment each on their own. Again, as good practice moves on, there's now lots of good practice written about how to understand and manage cumulative risk. So in order to, you should be evolving your practices in order to meet that continuing improvement standard. So it's the cumulative risk across your installation, understood at all times. I spoke a lot about SECIs, and there should be that clear link, between your major accident hazards, your SECIs, your performance standards, and your maintenance management system, right through to there being clear pass-fail criteria. And then when you do have an impairment, there should be that robust procedure that's escalated, and then the right type of assessment is done, and that those impairments are visible, to everyone. Human factors should be better implemented into your major accident hazard management. You should have procedures in place for the key human factors activities like safety critical task analysis, and then all of your applicable procedures, tasks should be subject to that analysis. And finally, I haven't really touched on that here, but there was a surprisingly large number of findings that related to emergency response and really just a failure to comply with PFIR, performing drills but not recording their results, or not having the equipment that your safety case says that it has. So are you happy that your emergency response risk assessments and plans, that they're up to date, so that they represent your asset, that they are understood by everyone that needs to understand them, that they're regularly drilled, but crucially that you record the results and then act upon those results? And then just sewn throughout this whole thing is, are you complying with everything that you say that you're going to do in your safety case? And is all the equipment that you say is in your safety case, that your safety case says there, is it all actually there? And again, obviously liking my calls to action in here, but it's to say that process safety management is incredibly complex. It's incredibly difficult. A lot of the activities that we do, are almost invisible. Major accidents are very rare, so it's difficult sometimes to track what's going on, and that's why we need robust KPIs. But it's more to say that anyone who works in the major hazard industry does have the ability to make a difference to process safety management to ultimately preventing major accidents. And whether that be if you're someone senior and that your attitudes and behaviours, that culture come down the way, or if you're a member of the workforce, making sure that your concerns are adequately escalated. And we really hope that taking this document, reading the statistics, reading the topics that apply to you, then that you can see some of the failures of others, and then that can then drive you to take action for yourself. So at the very beginning of this presentation, I said, I challenged myself and the company is, can we learn from the poor offshore inspection scores of others? And I really hope with that, quick run through today, that I've shown you that absolutely, we definitely can. And it's something that I think we should keep trying to do. It's been a bit more open, been a bit more transparent, and hopefully this document can help kickstart that. I hope that a lot of people have got benefit from reading that. So I think that's me on to my final slide. Sorry, I ran through that a little bit faster than planned. But just to say, is that document is completely free of charge. You can just go and pull a copy off of our website. We've also got a second document that we made. Again, it's free of charge on our website, and that is a list of assurance checklists. So for each of the topics that we looked at, we've got a list of 10 questions that you can go and ask yourself and perform a mini audit to see if you're at risk of having these failings too. So both completely free. Just go and pull them off of our website, and we'd love to hear your feedback on how you're able, on how you put those to use. And if you've got any questions, you can email me or email the company on this section below. So yeah, I'll hand back over to Craig, and we can see if there's any questions.
Yep, excellent, David. Thanks very much. And yeah, you provided some very thought-provoking questions that leaders can take away and look at their own work site. So thank you very much for that. We do have some questions, so I'll put these to you now. Do the HSE inspect management of technical changes? It's not mentioned in your graph. Is management of change a problem?
Yeah, so I don't actually, that's a good question. I don't believe that management of change is actually a topic in its own right, but if you go onto the HSE's even, well, if you just search the internet for, HSE offshore inspection guides, there's a guide for each topic, and management of change is something that's littered throughout. So it's definitely mentioned in the like loss of containment. There's examples of where companies have tried to use operational risk assessment as a substitute for management of like change. So it's not a topic in its own right, but it's something that's very important, and it's like written throughout lots of guides. And we have seen management of change mentioned quite a bit in the findings, and it's mostly not doing management of change rather than there being like inadequate management of like change. And that's why I made that point about it being very crucial with the training, is that everyone must understand not to make any changes outside of your MOC process.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. It's a management of change document tends to be something that is part of an investigation, not specifically a topic on its own. Another question here is the ORA a continuation of TRA from design, or is there any link between the two?
No, well, I suppose argue there possibly is, but no, I'd say your operational risk assessment, but again, it's worth stressing it's called many different things in different companies, but that is that you have got an impaired safety and environmental critical element. So like you've said in your design documents, in your safety case, that this equipment is safety and environmentally critical, and this is like your justification as to why it's safe to continue operating with that impairment. And an analogy, I'll like not name the person, but an analogy that a friend of mine gave is that if you were driving your car down a motorway and your speedometer suddenly broke and went down to 0, but you knew that there was a car garage just 5 minutes down the road, you could probably justify just keeping going and making your way to the car garage. But if that same thing happened, if your brakes failed, you'd probably say, no, I should probably just move to the side and stop. And that's all about that in judgment of impaired safety critical elements in the ORAs. Your starting point, this is advice I always give people, your starting point in an ORA should be like, right, we are not going to continue operations. Can we talk ourselves into saying, that we can? Whereas most ORAs, it seems to, what we're going to write down for our justification as to why we're going to keep going. So I'd say ORA is a separate thing specifically about the impairment of safety and environmentally critical elements.
Excellent. So we do have one question left. If anyone else has any questions, please type them into the questions tab. Okay. Please, can you give an example of what a SECI is? Are they hardware like relief valves or systems?
Yeah, so a SECI, a safety environmental critical element, so it's any part of your installation that could be both computer software or equipment that is designed to prevent a major accident or minimise its consequences, or if it failed, it could cause or contribute substantially. So that could be anything. That could be your emergency shutdown valves. It could be your hydrocarbon containing equipment. It could be your fire and gas detection, your lifeboats, and again with the goal setting regime in the UK, certainly with the offshore regulations, is that it's for you as a duty holder to like define those yourselves. And that safety environmental critical element is the system itself, and that'll have lots of different bits of equipment. So you might have a SECI for all your emergency equipment, and that'll include your lifeboats, your life rafts, your the PPE that people wear, and like so on. So it's specific pieces of equipment or software that are there to prevent major accidents from taking place.
Yeah, excellent. As an asset I was on, we had a SECI folder that everyone on the platform had to read and sign, so it was a good way of making sure those on board the installation were fully aware of what SECIs were occurring on the facility and what actions you had to take against them. So yeah, very important thing to keep up to date with. Okay, well, no more questions, David. So I've had some people come in saying very interesting presentation, good piece of work, thanks. Yep, a couple more saying thank you very much. So yeah, thank you, David, for taking the time out to present this webinar for us. As David says, the document is free. Please reach out to Salus Technical. Dave's left his contact details on the screen. So yeah, please get in touch with Salus for any more process safety needs. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a great
Cheers.
day. Bye.